to oil and gas protections. We're going to get started in just a minute with our exciting lineup of speakers as we allow more participants to join. If you're at your computer, we highly recommend clicking the link to join the video option. We'll be using pictures at the end of the program, and we don't want you to miss out. After the program, we'll be emailing the recording to everyone who signed up in the beginning, so you'll have access to the content for future reference. All right, thank you so much to all of you for joining us today. Welcome to our webinar, Roadmap to Oil and Gas Protections. I'm Vanessa Lynch, the Pennsylvania Field Organizer for Moms Clean Air Force. I've been working with Lisa Graves-Marcucci from the Environmental Integrity Project and Robin Martin with Food and Water Watch to create a series of webinars focused on how and why we should be advocating for protective oil and gas industry safeguards for our communities. We'll be keeping everyone on mute throughout the webinar, but we will be using the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen for our audience. If you have any questions during the webinar, we will respond via email to unanswered questions, and we'll be providing you with a lot of information tonight. So if you're new to advocating for oil and gas protections, the amount of information could feel sometimes a little overwhelming. Please know, Lisa, Robin, myself, we are all available to you after this webinar to help you learn more, and we encourage you to reach out to us. Unconventional drilling or fracking can occur in any community, regardless of the size, concentrated residential or rural nature of the area, or socioeconomic makeup. Many local municipalities believe they have limited ability to create protections for their community with regard to shale gas development and its highly industrialized infrastructure. But in fact, the opposite is true. Local municipalities have the right and the responsibility to establish necessary protections for their community through land use zoning and ordinances. And these protections are grounded in Pennsylvania rules, regulations, and laws, and can be extremely important in order to create safeguards for the air our families breathe, our local water sources, our overall environment, and our community's current and future development. Tonight's webinar is what I think is the most important of our three-part series. We will be introducing the citizen teams who are the drivers of change in their communities. These residents have placed themselves at the forefront of protecting their communities, willingly advocating for their rights to clean air and water, and exhibiting the endurance to continue this work through lengthy local government processes. They are the backbone of the progress being made in Allegheny County, and I am proud to call many of them friend. Let me introduce from Indiana Township, Karen Knudsen and Andreas Mayhofer, from Franklin Park, Patrick Pagano, and from West Deer Township, Joe and Tim Resinetti. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. We're planning a roundtable discussion among our participants about what these teams have done in their neighborhoods. So we'll be asking questions and giving each team the opportunity to share their experiences. So without further ado, Lisa, if you want to go ahead and take over.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And thank you all for joining us tonight. I agree with Vanessa. Although we've enjoyed all of the webinars and we've really learned things at each stop along the way, this one is really the one for folks who are finding themselves in their own communities facing news that oil and gas might be coming to town, or that they found out they don't have an oil and gas ordinance to begin with. What we're bringing to you tonight is really inspiration. It's the opportunity for folks to listen to people who are just like you, living in their communities, probably not even a year or so, or even 2 years ago that they would be doing this. And they've worked through some problems, some concerns, some challenges, and they're here tonight to sort of walk you through some of what they've learned. And each community, although they're all different and they have their different set of needs and different personalities that are involved in local government, some of the underlying things remain constant. So we're going to be pointing some of those things out where things are pretty common as far as the rules and how they unfold in local government. But yet there are unique things that each of these teams have done, they've employed in their communities, they've learned along the way, and we're hoping it inspires you to get involved, to remember to not get too overwhelmed, to try to share the load with others, and most importantly, reach out to networks like this. We're hoping that this conversation starts a networking of sorts, especially in Allegheny County communities where many of us are seeing this for the first time. So with that in mind, we're going to start, and as Vanessa said, we're going to do sort of a round robin. I'm going to ask some questions and ask each of the teams to answer some of these from their perspective. And some of the teams have been doing this a little longer. The West Deer team is brand new to this, so some of what they're doing is they're learning as they go, but they've had the help from some of the people on this call and some of our networks. So it'll be interesting to hear different perspectives on how to get started. So with that, I think it's a logical place to start is to ask each one of the teams, how did you originally find out that shale gas, oil and gas development was either coming to your community or perhaps had already arrived? Maybe let's start with Karen from Indiana Township.
Yeah, so for me, I was kind of tracking oil and gas development as it was coming across the state. I had seen that it was coming out in Westmoreland, and I figured that it was going to arrive in my neighborhood at some point soon. So I thought I was sort of paying attention to things, and I was really surprised when I noticed that they'd passed a well permit in Indiana Township, and I hadn't been aware of it, and it was a done deal. It had already gone through, and I was super upset about that, but I didn't really know what to do. And so I figured there was nothing I could do, and I was surprised to see a few months later there was some interest coming up in Fox Chapel, because Indiana Township is part of Fox Chapel School District, that there were some others who were interested in trying to organize and see what they could do to get some protections for our community. So I attended a meeting.
And you saw others who had similar concerns.
Mm-hmm. That's when it all started.
That's when it all started. And Andreas, you're also from Indiana Township. How did you learn that this oil and gas well pad had kind of sneaked right into your community?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for taking me on this panel. I'm honored to be here, and hopefully can be of help to others who are going through this right now or see it coming. So the way I learned about it, or my family learned about it, is how it often happens through a friend and neighbor. She told us there's an information session at our community, and so we went. She said, you know, this is important. It's about fracking. It's coming to our township. And so we went to this meeting, and that was the first time we heard about it. It was an information session that basically told us, yep, the operations or the construction of this well site are going to start pretty soon here. And we were absolutely shocked and floored, because like Karen, we were not aware of this at all. And what was even more shocking is that the permit had been given 2 years prior. So the permit in Indiana Township was given in 2016, and we learned about this in 2018 when the construction started. And so that was very frustrating, angering. And, you know, I was angry at our township leadership that they did not share this with us prior, didn't ask us. And I was also somewhat angry with myself because I didn't learn about it. I wasn't informed as a citizen as I should have been. And then the story kind of follows what Karen said. We quickly organized and got into neighborhood meetings, and but that's how I learned about it.
Mhm. That's great. That's great. And how about Patrick? You're from Franklin Park. How did you first hear about the opportunity for oil and gas to come knocking on your door?
Yeah, so first of all, I want to thank the panel here. I want to thank you all for the invitation, the honor to be here, and I hope I represent everyone in my community that was very active. So my story is I had been in touch with our zoning official for 10 plus years since I moved to Franklin Park, and fast forward to 2017, I called him and asked whether there was going to be vertical fracking in Franklin Park. So I sort of had my ear to the ground, and he said that the topography wouldn't allow it. Well, 6 months later, 4 months later, we got a survey in the mail to all residents in which people were asked whether they supported or opposed a lease for fracking under a major borough park. And of the people who responded, 55% were either opposed or strongly opposed to the lease. And then at the very beginning of December, council posted an announcement of a motion to approve the drilling. Just came right out of the blue for most of us. Really, we were shocked for a number of reasons that, this could be happening, but also that they were going ahead potentially with something against the will of the people. So I like to talk about the dividends of networking. We were lucky having Thaddeus Popovich, an environmental champion in the community, and Doug Shields, a Food and Water Watch. I, as well as a cadre of other people, were contacted, informed. We galvanized the community through a text relay with the help of Robin Martin. We texted over 2,000 people, and we got more than 200 people to pack our town hall. And that kind of started it all, really. That led to another meeting. There was a tabling of the motion, and we got 300 people next time, and it went from there. Thanks.
Thank you. And Joe and Tim, this just recently really kind of popped up in your community as well. Can you tell us how you found out about it?
Sure. I got a phone call from a friend of mine who had been made aware that these applications were before our planning commission. The applications were received at the end of 2019, and the representatives from the industry had been to one planning commission meeting. And so we found out, fortunately, very early in the process, and we're still in the middle of it. The application is still with our planning commission, and we were able to get to the second meeting that the oil and gas development was discussed.
And different for you as opposed to the other two communities, theirs were pretty far along when they found out. You found out pretty early in the game, right?
Right. These will be the first two well pads in West Deer if these applications are approved.
Okay. Okay. And so that's, I think, important for the folks listening to know that there are different, even if you find out late, there are still things you can do. So we'll talk about some of those things as this unfolds. I'm going to ask everybody that the next thing is, when you heard this news and you thought we have to do something, what did you begin doing? And I'm going to go back to Patrick because he said something interesting. I'd like him to explain what's a text relay and how did that work?
Yeah, it was a pleasant surprise to me. Something that I'm actually doing now that luckily I learned from Robin and Food and Water Watch. Basically, it's a mechanism, kind of an algorithm that sort of feeds you a very long list of personal cell phone numbers, and there are pre-scripted messages kind of just to inform people, and then it's an exchange on how to how to get involved and things like that. So it's a way of bringing people in and directing them. We directed them to the town hall to get involved, and is very, very effective.
That's great. And I think that's a point that I want to just sort of rest on for a minute. As you begin your process, don't feel like you have to go it alone. There are other citizen teams who have ideas. There are advocates that, like Robin and Vanessa and I on the call, reach out to people. Don't go it alone, because we don't want you to reinvent the wheel. And there's new technology available that maybe someone can teach you how to do the same thing. Karen, when you first found out about it, and of course you went to this, both you and Andreas and your neighbors and friends all went to this large meeting, what happened after that? How did you get everybody sort of informed and engaged on, how do you go and try to fix this?
Yeah, it was a really interesting process. It started with, these sort of larger groups of people gathering, and people are frustrated and upset about what's happened. There's a lot of grief around it, and people need to express their emotions. And sort of like this move to like, let's shut it down, let's protest in the streets and all this kind of stuff. And then over time, we sort of evolved to think about, okay, how can we be proactive? What can we do to at least make this a bit better for ourselves in the future? And as soon as possible, when these wells go in, can we work to change an ordinance? And I think what's interesting to me about that process is I felt really alone and, was going to do nothing when I found that the well had been permitted. I felt like the ship had sailed. And so to realize that there were still things that we could do to make it better for ourselves was pretty wonderful. And seeing the people around the table, who everyone came with a different kind of expertise and a different lens on the situation. So we had doctors who could provide the research on, or they would go off and do their research on the medical health impacts of fracking, and other people who had a legal background and they could look into the details on that. And then we would meet up, and over time, the group got smaller and smaller to a more core group of people who were really interested in trying to go to the township and present ideas for how they could improve the ordinance. And we couldn't have done it without having other community-based organizations who came in to help us and advise us. And there's so much support out there in the community. So you really don't have to reinvent the wheel. You just need to show up and commit a little bit of time to trying to do some research and to go to your township and talk to folks.
And Karen,
That's
you did
cool.
a bunch of door knocking and petitions too in Indiana Township, right?
Yeah, it was, it's this whole process. I felt like it was a little bit of punishment for having let this well permit come up under my nose when I was supposedly trying to be paying attention for its arrival. And so I said, well, I'm going to have to make myself get involved, and I'm going to spend some time on this, and I'm going to do some things that make me uncomfortable. And so Andreas's wife and I went out one day in the car, and we drove around the township to look at different parts of the neighborhood and talk to people. And it was amazing that even years after the initial permits, there's still many people in your community who have no idea that this is going on. So it is a little bit of getting out of your comfort zone, but it's so inspirational to see that there's all these people in the community that I didn't know that were also interested in doing what they could do to protect our community.
That's great. And Andreas, Karen mentioned that your wife Kathy got involved. Your early thoughts on, oh my gosh, this is happening, and what do we do next? What were your first impressions about how do we get people active and engaged on this?
Yeah, it was also interesting to me, as Karen said, there was obviously frustration and anger at the beginning, but I felt that we quickly channeled that energy and got this core group together, as Karen mentioned. And really the core group became very organized with regular meetings. And we laid out, in essence, a plan. What do we need to learn? How do we learn it? Who's going to take what responsibility? So we in essence delegated or volunteered for things. I'm gonna read the current ordinance, and I'm gonna highlight the areas that I hate, and or the next person said, okay, I'm gonna read the Hampton Township ordinance, and let's compare them. So we got organized pretty quickly in this core team. And as Karen said, we had more people at the beginning when the emotions were high, and that dwindled a little bit, but we still kept a larger circle of people close by that we activated, in a sense, when it was necessary, when there were Board of Supervisor meetings with a topic on the agenda of fracking, to show unity and to show strength, in a sense, and to show our leadership that people are interested in this topic, and that they are upset with the first choices and decisions that the board made. But we're also here to work with them, right? And I think, as Karen said, we were blessed to have people with different interests, different experiences, different expertise areas, and so it kind of naturally fell in place who would do what. So we were never short of volunteers in our group to say, yeah, I'm going to do this, and if nobody raises a hand, okay, I'm going to do it. So things got done if they had to be done.
That's great. And Tim and Joe, so your organizing is just underway, because this is all happening really kind of in the here and now. So tell us a little bit about how you reached out when you found out, and what have you been doing that has been drawing people in?
As soon as I found out, Tim and I went through our personal email contact lists of people that live here in West Deer that we've amassed over the almost 11 years that we've been here. And we got together about 300 email addresses of people that we knew for one reason or another through our daughter's school and church and softball and things like that. And I sent an email out just saying, this is happening, and please let me know if you want to come to a meeting, or what your level of involvement, whatever that might be. I'll keep you in the loop about things. And we got about a dozen responses of people who said, sure, let us know what happens with that. But the first meeting we went to in February, it was just the two of us, and then couple of people that live near a well pad, and they weren't really interested in talking to us or anything. So it seemed a little sad in the beginning that we thought it might just be the two of us going it alone. But an interesting thing that happened with our experience is right after that first meeting, the pandemic shutdown happened. And so everything switched to online, and suddenly I was able to go to all of these different environmental webinars and informational meetings and all these groups that I wouldn't have had access to otherwise. So I just started going everywhere and telling people, hey, I'm from West Deer and we're about to get 2 well pads. And I started to meet a lot of different people, and I eventually ran into someone from the Fox Chapel group who connected us with Lisa, who's just been phenomenal in helping us to understand the process and basically giving us templates to organize all of our information. And now that things are moving along, we pick up more people as they notify their neighbors. And also anytime we go to a meeting, whether it's in person or virtual, if there are other people there, we make sure we introduce ourselves to them and say that, would be glad for you to join with us, and we'll share what information we've gathered and the research that we've done so that they don't have to start over on their own.
And while Joe's been our organizer, I guess our community organizer primarily, my background kind of lended itself towards researching the technical side of things. So really gathering as much information as possible. And this is still an ongoing process. We learn something new just about every day. But through right to know requests, just calling and talking to people, whether it's with the township or other people's experiences, reading through just about every ordinance that Westier Township has. Like Joe said, we thought we were really fighting an unwinnable battle. But after collecting information, we realized that, as a township, we weren't really as bad off as some other experiences that we've heard, that we actually have an oil and gas section of our ordinance that gives us some protections if we hold ourselves as a township accountable to it.
Right, exactly. And that brings up a good point. So all of the panelists have mentioned that, the shock of the news, you settle into that, you start reaching out to folks to get people involved and active, and then you have to go to local government because that's where the decisions are made. We talked about that in the first session. There's the planning commission, and then they're the recommending or kind of research arm, I like to think of them. And then there's the voting board of supervisors or council. So just a quick show of hands, before oil and gas came to your community, how many of you had attended local government meetings? And how many of you had attended and spoken in front of local government meetings? So this was kind of a new, generally new for most everybody on the panels to go and actually speak, right? So I'm going to go through and just sort of, so folks, if there are new people listening in, they kind of get an idea of how this unfolds. So Patrick, when you found out about this, did you first approach your board, your council, or did you approach your planning commission, or did you approach both? Where did you start reaching out to local government?
So sort of both. We all just came together after that first text relay. Many people showed up, as I mentioned, in 200. And I think as some people started to go up to the podium, it kind of encouraged other people to go. Yeah, I guess I was one of the first because I had previous experiences. But from there, as you said, it was initial shock, awe, and anger that kind of plunged us forward into taking action because we just were blindsided by this. But it seemed, it was very encouraging. After that, we formed Protect Franklin Park, and people coalesced around that. And from there, we were able to really organize and kind of plan, what things we were going to do, but also what things needed to be said to the council. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that's great. And Andreas, when you and your team first approached Indiana Township, did you approach Planning Commission or the Board of Supervisors to try to affect change?
That's a very good question. And to be honest, I don't remember if we first, which we approached first. I just remember from that point on, we tried to have representation on both the Board of Supervisor meetings and the panel, the Planning Commission.
Right.
So that there was always somebody there to pay attention. And obviously the other thing we did is from that point forward, we looked at the agendas that the township posts beforehand, the meeting agendas, and then also read through all of the past meeting notes just to try to catch up what has happened. And and we went back to 2016 to read the meeting notes when the approval was given, the permit was given. So short answer is I don't quite remember if we went to one or the other first. We definitely, from that point on, tried to be present at both when they happened.
Right.
And you guys, Andreas, remind me, you guys actually were able to have a press conference as well when
Yeah.
community
So
got more engaged.
Right. And again, I'm not quite sure if that was if that was a Board of Supervisors meeting or a
I think
planning
it was a
commission meeting.
board meeting.
Yeah. So
Yep.
yeah, so we invited press to join, and basically before the meeting itself, we were outside and they asked, a couple of us questions, and took pictures, and I don't know if they videotaped it.
Yeah.
But we invited press to attend one of the meetings where fracking was on the agenda.
Right. And we'll be showing pictures at the end. You'll see some photos of that press event.
Right.
And just real quickly, that's one of the things that we talked about in many of these communities. There are certain times when calling the press makes sense. When you have a particular meeting that's maybe part of a public hearing, or you're trying to show them this show of support for affecting change. You don't want to call the press all the time, because it's sort of like you want to save that for the really important moments you want to bring forward. But we'll talk a little bit more about that when you see the pictures. And the other thing I want to just touch on before I go to Karen is that Andreas brought up a really good point. Many of the communities now have all their minutes for the Planning Commission and their Board of Supervisors or Council online. So if you want to go back and find out what company, who from the company, what did they say, what were they asking for, you can go back and it's recorded in pretty decent detail, and you can piece together timelines. You can even look what's going on right now. If you have a worry that maybe this is happening, that's really a good place to start to sort of bring yourself up to speed. So Karen, when you started going to the meetings, this was not something you had normally done before, right? And speaking to the board was something new for you?
Yeah, it's been a real wild ride for us, I think. And I think your work with us has been so incredibly helpful in learning how to talk to these people. They're just 5 people from our community who are representing us, and they are doing their job to the best of their ability. And it's kind of a shock when all of a sudden the whole rest of the community shows up at these meetings and people are really frustrated and yelling at them, and they get a little bit defensive. And so we had to figure out how best to convey our concerns in a way that would hopefully get some action. And so before we were working on this project together, I didn't know what an MPC was, or a BMP, or all these acronyms that are floating out there. And through the process of learning about the ordinances and reading other communities' ordinances, we came up with action items that we really wanted to press on. And then we came up with a plan, and each person sort of took some piece of the puzzle that they wanted to present to the board. And, over time, we found that we suddenly had a listening ear on the other side of the room, and they realized that we had valuable information to share. And we had all of the documents presented that they could look at, and they took those to heart. And I think, the added pressure of having the press conference as well, it was a little extra motivation perhaps to make those changes. But yeah, so it was a real learning experience. It wasn't easy, but you just get up there and say your name and where you're from, and you have some prepared remarks, and you realize, I just have to do this one tiny little piece, and the rest of my team is going to have my back and, bring the details that I forgot to mention to the table. So it was a real collaborative effort.
That's right. And if you can remember, we had been going, Vanessa, you and I, Andreas, lots of folks have been going to those meetings on a pretty regular basis, but it took a while. And there was one meeting in particular where something changed because they realized we were bringing them usable information. Do you recall when that happened? And can you, not to put you on the spot, but go ahead, Andreas, do you remember that? If you can share that, there were times when we thought they weren't listening at all. And then suddenly something changed.
Yeah, I can't remember the exact moment in time, but it was definitely during a Board of Supervisors meeting. And we had presented information about how they should interpret their own ordinances and what they are allowed to do as a community. And one of the supervisors turned to the solicitor and asked, "Are they right? Are they right? Can they do this, or can we do this?" And the solicitor said, "Yeah, absolutely, they're right." So I felt that yeah, that was somewhat of a turning point where we changed from the pesky nuisance that we were, asking all these questions and pestering them, to somewhat of a maybe a resource, maybe a partner. I don't know how far I can go with that, but it felt, there was a little bit of a change. At least we were more respected at that point.
Yes, right. And with Joe and Tim, your situation in West-Ear, you are just beginning, but I think you had something similar happen. You did a lot of homework, spent a lot of time putting together packets of information, and you took that to the Planning Commission. How was that received?
I mean, it's certainly still a fluid situation here in West-Ear. But I do remember the first time I had a planned comment that and some information that I passed out to Planning Commission members. And I had done my homework and read through the ordinances and matched it up with the applications and the maps provided through just right to know requests that we got. And I came up with some real, I guess, interesting or tough questions for our local government bodies of how does what's proposed match up with our ordinances? Because to me, when I read them, there were some real problems. So I asked the question, and I got a response that was, well, that is what it says. So there's been pushback at times of, well, we've gotten advice from so and so that says this, and then they say, but you're right, it says what it says. So but it's for us, we're unique because we're the only people here who really haven't accomplished anything real just yet.
We're full of potential.
Yes, absolutely.
So
you represent how it all starts, but you also really underscore the point of networking, the importance of networking with other groups to get you up and running very quickly. And you've done that, right?
Right. In every meeting, we're going back and presenting more information, just like that. And, it's received on varying levels of things.
Right. And I think it's important. I think everybody would agree. We're realists, right? We understand that they're not always going to agree with everything. But what we try to do is we take the personal concerns and match it up with facts. And so even if they might disagree with us on our personal concerns, you can't really dispute the facts. And I think that's what starts to change people's minds is when you're especially using their own information, either from the application that was submitted to them that they're reviewing or their own ordinances, which, these are the rule books basically, and we want everybody to follow the rule books. That kind of brings it to, we're offering factual information to help affect change in a way in which they can actually do it. It's within their guardrails that the state rules and regulations put on local governments. So that's the important thing, is going to ask them things that we know they legally can and should be doing, right? So, to the point of, as you were doing this process, what was the thing that you found most challenging, and what was the thing you found you were most proud of? And Patrick, maybe we'll go to you. What was the most challenging, and what was the thing that you were most proud of? And it doesn't even have to be a full accomplishment. Just think something that you felt proud that you would maybe want somebody else going through the same journey to know. Patrick, you're muted. Patrick, you're muted.
we said it. Sorry
you
about
go.
that. So yeah, after that initial kind of outpouring of frustration and anger, and there was kind of the council took umbrage, to how almost like, how dare you tell us, we're doing the best for our community. We had to find some common ground. And I think that was the most challenging for us to convince the council that we were working with them as citizens, as was said. And we did this through a number of means. We were very organized, having this organized meeting and then meeting at my home and at churches. We really divided our tasks evenly, and just we saw it more as a role of educating the council and learning with us. So I guess it was going from the adversarial to the more cooperative. That was the challenge. And I think what really broke the ice was asking council members to meet by ward with citizens. So we did that by precinct and ward, and those meetings started off very contentious and heated, but we had people who calmed each other down, and then once we did, there was a rapport, and we found that they were listening and they were receptive. Your other question was, what am I most proud of? I guess that we achieved what we were out for. That we achieved a highly protective and restrictive ordinance beyond our expectations, and we really did have the power to bring people together and galvanize people to action, and even encourage people on the council to do their own research, and our solicitor to go above and beyond and do her own research and place added protections into the ordinance. So yeah, that's what I'm most proud of.
Patrick,
That's
I have to interject. I'm proud of so many things that Protect Franklin Park did. What I was really impressed by was, as we started this process with the research and really gaining rapport with council, was how a few people were inspired to run for council to keep the in more environmental protection in place, and how civil the elections were too. Like, rather than, like Patrick said, rather than it being adversarial, saying like, I might be running for council here and really trying to advocate for more environmental protections, but that is not to say that I don't admire and am grateful for what you've already done on council. So I was really impressed with like the dual themes going on.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And in
I would
all the
completely
cases,
agree.
in all the communities that I've been working in, industry likes to divide the community, and they like to put those wedges in there. And so when Patrick and his team and others, on this webinar went in and found some common ground, and they talked about, we admire what you're doing, we respect what you're doing, but we'd like to help you. We'd like to be, partners in this research if it's just that. And we're looking for protections. We're not anti anything. We're for protections so that the health of the community is protected, the resources of the community. So I think that's kind of the common theme, and that, I'm glad you brought that up, Patrick, because, oftentimes that is the first reaction, is to go, what? And to be angry. But if everybody goes to their respective corners, nothing gets done, right? And I know that happened in Indiana. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it's breaking up a little. I just want to say, yeah, we were dogged, but once we realized that there was common ground, and actually we were pressing the council, and I remember one evening where there was a turning point where one of the council members had an outburst and said, "We don't want this either, but but we cannot ban it," and just try to understand our position. And that, I think, that created, generated welled up empathy, and kind of, we saw ourselves in their shoes a little bit. At least it did for me. I know for some of my
Right.
friends too.
Right, and I think that's right. And you brought up a good point. The way that the laws are written in Pennsylvania today, you cannot ban it. It has to be allowed, but local government can restrict it through protective measures. And that's what we are all trying to convey to local government leaders. A lot of them are afraid. They think they have to just take what industry's asking. So, you know, Karen, when this happened in Indiana, I think that was sort of the initial reaction they had too, is they said, you know, look, we had to do this and we had no choice. What was you know, when you first went, what did you find interesting or challenging, and what were you most proud of?
I think definitely the most challenging part is just how opaque the whole process is. And it's like, it shouldn't be that hard for people to figure out, you know, where are these regulations, and to look for, like, having to file right to know requests and things, and digging through minutes of meetings and trying to figure out what had happened. Like, it just seems like it shouldn't be that hard. And I think for our the well pad that we wound up with, you know, the hearing was advertised it was advertised in a paper that is physically not delivered in our township. And so no one knew about it. And it was put through right before the holidays, and it just sort of skated through, and we didn't really have a chance to really understand what was being proposed. There was no community meeting. The township didn't say, hey, we're getting this big new thing. What do you guys think? It just went through in a way that felt less than transparent. So that, I think, was a big challenge for me in this whole process. And then the thing I'm most proud of was just realizing that there's so many people in the community who are interested and motivated enough to attend meetings, to come out for these big events, to pitch in. Everyone's super busy, but people find ways to, like, carve out time to help out. And so that was super inspirational. And then to wind up with, you know, a rewritten new ordinance, huge accomplishment. And we also got 2 members of our team. One's a Board of Supervisors member now, and one's on the school board. So, you know, it's just kind of interesting to see. And I think there's other, you know, very positive kind of leadership-y community things that have come out of our little Fox Chapel group.
Yeah, that's great. And Andreas, how about for you? What was challenging or interesting, and what were you most proud of?
Yeah, there are many different things that I could answer here, but one of the challenges that I felt was, now I forget, I think Patrick touched on it a little bit, is, you know, these are human people too, and they have reactions and they have emotions. And how do we approach them, not to antagonize, right? So you're kind of walking on eggshells because you want to get something out of them, but at the same time you want to push them a little bit, and it's a very fine line, this pushing and pulling, and that wasn't always easy. And thanks to you for helping us navigate that sometimes really narrow path. And then also, as Karen said, maybe in slightly different words, it is somewhat like 3-dimensional chess, right? You have to anticipate things. You know, there's industry involved, there's other citizens involved, there's our township leadership involved, and I'm sure others. And to anticipate the reactions, you know, if I go up there and speak my opinion, you know, how are the other people reacting to this? And how is the industry going to take this? You know, are they going to turn it around and, you know, stick it in my face in some way? So I felt, you know, as Karen said, that was a little challenging to understand the 3 levels of that chess game. And you know, the proudest factor, as Karen said, again, I think we ended up with a with a very good ordinance, zoning ordinance, there's always things we could do more. But if I'm not mistaken, I think the land area where fracking can happen was reduced from more than 90% down to less than 15% or 14%. So that's a big win. But as I said, there's still things that could be improved, like setbacks. They're still too lenient on those, in my mind, anyway.
Right.
So we have future work cut out for us.
Right. And that's the thing too, I just want to remind people, and we talked about it in our team meetings, ordinances are sort of living documents. If you are successful in getting some changes that make a difference for today, it doesn't preclude you from coming back and asking for changes a year from now, if you find out new information. So that's another reason to stay engaged with your local government, to make sure that they're keeping pace with new rules and information that might be coming from the courts here in Pennsylvania. So to Joe and Tim, I know this is the beginning of your journey, but just framing it in the beginning, what are the things that you might be finding challenging or frustrating now? And even early on, what is maybe one or two things that you're proud of as you begin your journey?
It's all pretty challenging at this point. There's just so much to learn and so much information, and it just seems like a really big task, and there's not a whole lot of definitive action that we can take. I have trouble balancing this idea that I'm doing what I can, but I still might not get the result that I'm hoping for.
For me, one of the challenging, interesting things is, even though we've just started advocating for protections in our township, it turns out that the industry, oil and gas, has been advocating and talking to our township for years, even though we haven't had any deep well activity. So, we're definitely they got a head start on us, that's for sure. So that's been, but I don't think it's, we're the residents, we live here. We're gonna behave like these are our homes. So, and we found so much community support around us. We're just members of a group, and I hope we're representing them well tonight. But that's been probably the most rewarding part for me, is some of the community connections that we've made. We've found that that protecting our community is a non-denominational, not bipartisan support or nonpartisan activity. We've basically introduced neighbors to each other through both reaching out to our groups and united people for our own common good, which has been extremely rewarding. And every day that we add new people into our group is a good day.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Can I add to that? Yeah, I just want to add to that. I also want to say that I was exhilarated and really proud of, people from all walks of life and all sorts of talents getting up, MD, PhDs, physicians, engineers, really taking the time out of their busy lives to come together. But I want to say to Joe and Tim that it's really about being dogged and persistent, and eventually you can change the hearts of people just with information too. And I want to say also that I'm very proud of our council in that they actually went ahead with one request that I and another person made to look into solar energy. And so they're exploring that right now, solar panels on all of our municipal buildings. So that was an added bonus. And I really, and a monitor for air quality on the municipal building in honor of one of our members. So that was just so thrilling. We would never expected that at the beginning, and I really think it was about being methodical, building rapport, being persistent, and really choosing words correctly. I know I'm an abrasive person, so I have to choose my words very carefully. And I think rhetoric matters. It really does.
That's right. That's right. And I want to, you know,
So keep at it. Keep at
yeah,
it.
I was going to say in following in what you just laid out there, Patrick, you know, what words of wisdom like that can we give to new teams like Tim and Joe? Like, maybe tell us, how long was your battle? How long did you spend on this? And, you know, what is it that you would do to say, here's how you can keep folks engaged, or here, give them some ideas about, because I think that's one of the challenges. There's this big rush at the beginning when people come out to say, what's happening? And then all of a sudden it drops back to maybe 8 to 12 people. So maybe if you can, you know, we'll go around and, you know, if you want to start, Patrick, since you were already talking, maybe some words of advice to Joe and Tim and others who might be beginning this journey. It's a long, bumpy ride. How do they survive that?
So I think you're right. I think at the beginning we were all apoplectic. We didn't know how to express ourselves. There was just so much anger. But coming together, we even had what we called coffee clutches on Saturday mornings to support each other. It was really fun. And I really think that, you know, the psychology of supporting each other helped. But once we realized what we needed to do, you know, to write a report and recommendations that we did over 3 or 4 months, and to use social media. Everyone had a different task. I think that's true of anything in life, like right now with the elections. If you're doing something, you feel so much better. So I would just say, you got to get over that initial anger, and you have to channel it, as someone said, and channel it in as much as constructive and productive a way. It really took about 4 or 5 months before I started to see a change in the council's attitude. And then, of course, yes, I'm very proud of my friends who ran for council. That got the attention, I think, of council as well. But, you know, I don't see this as a partisan thing. I don't see it as partisan. Maybe you approach it from a different way. With one party, you call it conservation, and another party, you call it environmental activism, but we're all trying to achieve the same goal, to protect our families, really. And that's something, I don't know where I learned, but I think is very, very important. So,
Right.
I just say, just keep at it, stay calm, and realize you're gonna get things wrong. We made mistakes, we got information wrong, and we got flack from our panel, our council on that. But we had to say, you know, we're not professionals. We're doing this in our free time. We all work, and sometimes we're going to get things wrong, and we apologize. We'll get it right. It's self-correcting. We'll come back with the correct information next time. So
That's good advice.
how
That's
we
good
did it.
advice. Andreas, how about to you? What sort of advice would you give to new starting teams about the endurance and the persistence that might be needed? You're muted. Yeah.
It happens, and we wanted to avoid it, right?
That's all right.
Well, I was going to say to Tim and Joe directly that I'm actually very impressed how much they have already accomplished. You know, for being relatively new at the game. You know, for us, it took close to 2 years to get the ordinance changed, and so it's not a quick. You know, it's not a sprint; it's a marathon. And you have small wins, you know, 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of thing. But you know, it takes patience and persistence. But some of the things that I think are happening is, you know, reaching across townships. So don't just try to engage people within your own township. Kind of like what we're doing right here. We have representatives from 3 townships, and we learn from each other. And, you know, taking the Hampton Township ordinance as an example and making ours even better. And now ours is can be an example. And I saw there's a question on on the Q&A, yes, we do have a well pad because we learned of it too late, and the activity to change the ordinance was after the well pad was permitted and the construction started. Now with the new ordinance, it's much more difficult for industry to kind of steamroll our community and put a well wherever they want. So the well right now is what's called a medium density residential zone under conditional permit. You know, it still doesn't make sense to me that something like this, an industrial operation, can be in a residential area, but that's why you need to pay attention to your ordinances and try to make them protective to avoid that kind of thing.
Right.
Well, and Karen, one of the other things that I feel like was really exciting about Andreas, Patrick, yourself, you guys all actually have taken action at the state level as well, right?
Like going to
Like-
hearings and things.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I think once you get involved in the process, you realize like there's just a huge constellation of other groups and other ways to contribute. So from going to hearings or learning how to test water to help out with a citizen science study on water quality around frac pads, there's a whole bunch of different ways to get involved for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was wonderful seeing you guys sort of step out and attend the hearings at the state level on regulations for methane emissions, which is the primary component of natural gases, which is what comes from fracking. So it was great to see you guys sort of go out and attend those hearings and really advocate at the state level as well for some really amazing protections there too.
And going to meet our representatives.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think it goes to show that this is multi-leveled, right? It's not just local approvals, but those local approvals sometimes have state rules that guide them. And then sometimes the state rules have federal rules that guide them. So it's really like building blocks. And the more that you network with some of the other team members in the area and other advocacy teams, you really see where voices from the local community play a very key role. And so I think it empowered some of the team members who learned, you know, at the local level, hey, we have something to say and people will listen. It then inspired you to take that message to the state level as well. So that's the other part of it, is that our network grows. It grows not only in our communities, but in our region and then in our state, right?
If I may add to that.
Oh yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, so our council pushed back at us and said, well, why don't you go to the state level? Why are you pestering us? This is something that the state should be dealing with. And we kept coming back and saying, well, no, it's your job to contact our representatives. And they actually did. They wrote a 3-page letter to Governor Wolf, Turzai, and Lindsey Williams, Senator Williams. Didn't get a response, but at least it was out there. And this was, you know, a totally Republican panel really sticking it to their higher up. So that was very important for us. And that was one of the biggest surprises. But it is multi-strategic. It really isn't just one kind of method. You have to take it at different levels.
Right. And if I can circle back real quickly to something that Andreas said in answer to the question that was in the chat, that's a very good reason, or a very good example of, even if you already have oil and gas in your community, there's always room for improvement. And if you can go in and you can do some fact finding and networking to see what other ordinances are out there, what kind of language do they have? And one of the things I know I've heard Karen talk about is that oftentimes the solicitors are the same in these communities. And so if they've written, you know, in Indiana Township, the solicitor is also the solicitor in Churchill. He's also the solicitor in West Deer. So they're a valuable resource. If you find out that your solicitor is writing these ordinances for other communities, maybe look at those. And he or she might be able to say, as an expert that they've hired, hey, this is okay. You can do this. You have a right to put these protections in. And that's the key thing. Always remember, these are protections, not restrictions, not anti. We're for protections. We're for protecting health and natural resources. Tim, did you have your hand? Were you going to say something? Oh, okay. I didn't want to like skip over you. I'm going to move to I think we only have like 2 more questions, but I want to move to the question that I think is kind of, we're kind of coming full circle. We talked about how you learned about oil and gas in your community, but after you learned about it on a very personal level, what connected you to take the step to get engaged and to get others engaged? What was that personal reason that you stepped forward in such a big way? Karen, what did it for you?
I just really love living in Indiana Township. It's rural. It's such a beautiful place. And I live, I don't have public water. I have well water. And so that was a particular concern for me when fracking was coming to town. I was really concerned about my water supply being contaminated. And also, just the impact. Pennsylvania is such a water-rich place. We're so blessed with that. And the idea that fracking was going to put our water supply in peril, all the downstream communities, was really scary to me. And seeing how much land we're devoting to this relatively, it's going to be a short-term kind of deal, the natural gas boom, and to see how much land has been used to put in pipelines and fragment the forests. It's putting pressure on wildlife in our area. We're getting more bears pushed into our area as their range has been disrupted by all these clear cuts for the pipelines. It just seems really short-sighted and sad, and it made me really want to act and try and do what I could do to protect Pennsylvania for my family and my kids' future. It's a difficult time coming ahead with climate change, and I think that we should really be doing what we can do to preserve our natural resources. Keep it in the ground.
Keep it in the ground, yes. Andreas, how about for you? What were the personal reasons for you to become involved?
Yeah, so actually, the one reason to become involved and to stay involved, and that's really the health and well-being of my family and my neighborhood. And we all know, or it is well known, that fracking poses serious health risks. And just as the construction of this fracking site in my neighborhood started, my daughter was diagnosed with cancer. And I hope you can imagine how frightening that news was, and at the same time to face this this industry that is known to spew out carcinogens. My daughter is in remission, has been in remission for 2 years, but we're still living basically next to this industrial site. And so I'm still frightened, and I'm going to stay engaged and see that other neighborhoods don't have to go through this.
That's right. That's right. And how about Tim and Joe? I know we're gonna in a few minutes, we're gonna be showing some slides and some, trips down memory lanes for each one of our teams. But if you can just give us a few words of what were the personal things that drew you into doing more on behalf of your community.
Tim and I grew up in Washington County. I lived in Prosperity, PA, which is part of the title of Eliza Griswold's book, Amity and Prosperity. And we moved before the development really started in Washington County. But when we look around at the places where we went as children, the home where I lived now has a well pad a half mile from it. It seems like everywhere we went has a well pad.
And my story, my mom's house. So on one side of it, about a quarter mile away, is the Arden landfill, which if you haven't read Justin Noble's reporting on fracking waste ending up in our landfills, that's something you should definitely Google and check out Justin Noble's reporting. But then on the other side, there's a well pad about a half mile away. When I look at Google Earth and look at the houses where my friends grew up, my entire school district, there is a well pad within a half mile of every one of those homes that I slept overnight in as a child. And you can, when you zoom out on Google Earth, you can basically see them from outer space. They're so big. I wouldn't want to move back there in that situation, and I certainly don't want to have my home now turn into that same thing.
And additionally, the related infrastructure, that processing plants in Houston, we have friends that live near there and have dealt with smells and
Evacuations.
fires at the Mark West processing plant. And hearing those stories made us very motivated to make sure that we have a voice in whether or not that happens here.
That's right. And Patrick, how about you personally, after you heard, the news and you're dealing with all the facts and figures, what's the personal thing that got you started and keeps you engaged?
So I'll give you a little bit of the backstory. I've been very passionate about environmental issues, nature, protections, wanted to be a meteorologist for a long time. So I've been doing a lot of reading over the course of a lifetime just into these issues, and never really thought it was going to hit home. And I guess I was just stimulated to action because of the health of my family and community, as Andreas said, and really I felt I had something I could bring to the table as a PhD biomedical scientist in pharmacology toxicology. So the ability to review the scientific literature and to distill that information for the scientists and lay public, I think is something I've always enjoyed. And I guess just coupled with tenacity and belief in science really drove me personally.
Well, we appreciate that everybody has stepped forward for their communities, and we're glad for the folks who are tuning in, watching it on live stream, or actually watching it through the Zoom platform. One of the things that we wanted to bring to you sort of as the conclusion of this, but it's really not the conclusion, right? It's sort of the link between here's the discussion, here are some of the lessons learned, but here's sort of the pictorial representation of some of what's already happened. And as we said, ordinances are living documents. There may be changes that are necessary. We're all working together. No community has the same exact set of circumstances, but if we can help one another, then if all the Allegheny County communities and then the next layer out in Beaver and Butler, if everybody gets protections in place, it helps our whole region. So Robin, I think we're going to start with Tim and Joe's slides first. And if you can tell us, kind of walk us through some of what you've depicted on here. And I think if you can end with what, if anything, has surprised you, either about your efforts or your involvement with others that might be encouraging or might be something that others can learn from.
So this is the Google Earth image of my childhood home and the well pad that's next to it. That was the view looking down the quiet country road that goes right out to a well pad. And we've heard from neighbors that still live there that the truck traffic on this road and the dirt and the noise and everything was pretty impactful.
And I can say back when Joe and I were dating, that's a small, tiny road that should not have that type of traffic on it.
This is Tim doing some document prep with his collating and his stapling. Real good work with the stapler there.
So this, if we could go back a second, the last, oh, I'm missing it. Sorry.
There we go.
So this was a Google Earth image I put together of the Leto well pad proposed in our community and its proximity to local homes. So I basically drew lines of here's what our ordinance says the setback has to be, and look at all these homes that it falls onto, all these residential properties. And then the other is just a picture of where hopefully one day there will never be a well pad. This is us engaging with our planning commission and our local government bodies of going to meetings and speaking.
And there we are hiking in the woods with our daughter.
Which is what this is all about, right? Especially when you move to a community that has some nature and rural aesthetics to it, you want to be able to enjoy that, right?
Definitely.
Right. Was there anything so far that has surprised you? Or is it still to be continued?
I've been surprised by just how many great people there are in our community that really care about this issue and that have come together and have a willingness to be educated and go to meetings and have already been doing a lot that we just didn't know about. And it's really been a good benefit of it to get to know people that live here.
That's great. Thank you for all you're doing, and we'll continue to assist you because your journey is just beginning. So we're happy to help. And I think next we have the FCA Cares team, and Karen and Andreas are going to share their thoughts on some of the images that we've captured along the way and what that might mean and what may have surprised them.
Karen, do you want to talk about this one? We mentioned this one, so this was before the council meeting or Board of Supervisors meeting and that press conference that we talked about earlier. And it just shows a small group, but we had a couple of people that went to the microphone and directly spoke to the press.
And there were a whole bunch of, what do you call that? Petition signatures. We had a lot of petition signatures to present.
Right.
This was a picture I took of a pipeline development. And I think what surprised me about it was, you know, you think it's going to be a well pad, and that's all you hear about is a well pad. And then lo and behold, pipelines appear. And I think there's 2 separate pipelines that they put in for the Indiana Township wells. And one of them was just to bring water up. Instead of bringing so many water trucks in, they were going to take it right from the river. And a neighbor of mine lives near this, and this was a really difficult job. She said that she could hear the workmen out there just having a terrible time, yelling and screaming, and they lost a lot of workers that couldn't stick with the job. A lot of landslides and erosion. Like, it's a very steep terrain, so it was a tough project for them to put in. And it took out, you know, a lot of really nice trees and land that the township could be using in the future for something much more beneficial for our community than ruining the land with and destroying the trees for a pipeline that's not going to be used forever.
And
Karen,
Karen,
you and I had, when you were taking some of these pictures, we had gone up to the Rachel Carson Trail, but the well pad actually made the trail have to move, right?
Yeah, it was pretty sad.
Vanessa,
Yeah.
do you want to explain that one?
So these are some of our local kiddos, including my daughter, who went to the Board of Supervisors meeting to talk about their concerns about living near this and having well pads close to their schools and park and places that they play and spend their time.
And Karen, you supplied these pictures?
This is a picture of the water pipe. That's a temporary water pipe, I guess. I don't know
Yes.
if they've taken it out since then. I don't know.
Mhm.
But yeah, it does cross the Rachel Carson Trail and reroutes the trail, and was quite a disruptive construction process for us.
Yes.
More speakers at the council meeting, obviously.
Yeah, and that's your wife and your daughter, and we're so
Yeah.
grateful that they have been so involved right from day one. Mhm.
Yep. Yeah, and that is something that I think every well site faces during construction and maybe even into operation. But we were certainly blessed with that. So the township told us that during the construction over, I think it was the first year or so, that there would probably be somewhere between 20 and 30,000 individual truck trips to that particular site. And this is, we're in rural country here. Our roads are small. They are not constructed to withstand traffic, heavy traffic like that. And I think we have some other pictures that show that road repair was necessary afterwards. So a whole bridge over Deer Creek had to be reconstructed. And obviously that caused traffic problems. Yeah, so that's also something that industry doesn't talk about initially, all the traffic that's necessary to get the site up and operating and then keep it operating.
And I'm not sure how it worked out for the township in terms of being adequately reimbursed for the repairs, and like if the bonds are big enough to cover the damage and things like that. Also, the company donated a very small amount of money to the Rachel Carson Trail to reroute it. So it just seems like industry could be doing a bit more to help out the communities that they're doing a lot of damage to in their construction process.
Mhm. And I think, is that the last one, Robin, for FCA Cares? Last photo? And we can switch, and Patrick is going to share photos from Protect Franklin Park.
Yeah, so I might need help from Robin on some of these, but these are some of the early flyers and information that we sent out. Actually, it was sort of a coincidence. My wife and I were just driving down one of McAleer Road one day, and we saw this well, and we just started calling around. We were infuriated that this well, that they had told us that it wouldn't be a well in our township, and this well popped up. So my wife and I just went door to door, these flyers out and telling people they needed to take action. Turned out it wasn't a fracking well. It was they were capping an old, conventional well, but it didn't matter to us because it kind of spurred us into action. And I guess that one on the upper left is the title to my editorial. Is that right, Robin, that I wrote? Following, or is that what one of the original articles? But
It
I
was one
wrote
of
an
the,
editorial kind of
Mhm.
meeting.
Yeah, it was one of the community editorials. I think it was by, it might have been yours or anything, but it was such a communal effort anyway. There were so many
That is.
op-eds and LTEs
Mhm.
during this time.
And in the lower left is a sign of, our beautiful Lynbrook Park. It's so precious. So many people love. So many different activities can be done there. It's very densely wooded in a very rural part of our township. So people, as I said, from all walks of life, all, economic levels came out. They just were really infuriated by the idea that they were going to frack under this beautiful park. And we saw it as a spring. For me, it was a springboard to the bigger issue, of vertical fracking. Yeah, so
Mhm.
that really set us in motion. And then this must be the December 19th meeting, where, they had the motion to approve that came upon us very quickly. And we text relayed and got people out. They were out the door, up and down the wall, standing for many, many hours. I was just so impressed by how the community and people, what impressed me even more were people, from communities first, so Wickley, Gail Murray and others came out with signs, and we were told not to have signs, but it just kind of really lifted our spirits and got us really motivated. So this is just one of the first meetings. And then the next picture, I think, is after another relay, we got people out for the next meeting that was going to be a hearing on the same issue that was tabled to approve that leasing under the park. And they picked this larger venue because they could see it coming, that more people coming, and 300 plus people came. People are out the door in the parking lot waiting to get in. People told me later that they just decided to go home because they couldn't get in. And this is just a very contentious meeting. And I really think we impressed upon the council how important this issue was to us. And I guess this is KDKA covering one of the meetings. We had them out a couple of times, and really was just good, as was said, to get the word out, not to over kind of utilize the press, but to get the message out that we really won in this battle that really we thought would go against our favor. So it was a very exciting night. And I think we have the fun ones. Oh no. Oh, these are the fora that we have. One of them that we had, I think, in early March, where I and another member of Protect Franklin Park was asked to present on the issues surrounding the oil and gas ordinances, the laws, the Act 13, the Supreme Court cases, and we got I'd say 50 plus people there, which was really pretty impressive. And I think this is one of the first times people started talking, or at least I was aware that there was a movement afoot to put new members on the council. Susan Striz was at this meeting, and others, and Matt, I think. So yeah, it was just a good way to educate people. And we did this again the next summer at another venue. We invited Larry Schweiger, who's a local environmental hero champion for us, and he spoke on his history with these issues and educated us on the dangers of fracking. And there was also a physician from Physicians for Social Responsibility who, by the way, put out an amazing compendium for the state of New York that I've used as a resource, and just a very, very very smart and active organization that really collates all the information on the health effects of fracking, the deleterious health effects. Next. Oh, this is the fun stuff. So, you know, bittersweet. The man in the center is Thaddeus Popovich, who really had been standing guard and going to the council and every meeting you could think of for years. And he really kind of had his ear to the ground and saw these things coming. And he's just been such an inspiration and a mentor to me. And unfortunately, because of what's happening in this area and his asthma problems, he decided to move to Berkeley, California this summer. And it was heartbreaking for us, but we had this great socially distanced party for him at North Park. And these are just some pictures we took together. And, you know, he's still texting me and emailing me and kind of getting me more excited about issues and things. So he's just a great friend and mentor. He was involved in ACAN and a number of other activities, really consequential in the area for many years. And so we miss him, but we know we'll be in touch.
Yeah.
And I think that's it.
And I think that's it, right? Yeah. So you know, I have one quick, someone did ask in the question, and this is to Vanessa, Karen, and Andreas. They want to know the name of the well pad in Indiana Township, and it escapes me at the moment. Why can't I remember the name of that well pad?
It's the Miller well pad.
Miller pad, yeah.
That's it. Okay. So I think that does it for the the round robin part of it. I want to turn it over to Vanessa for our conclusion, but I do want to just remember and sort of end on this note. And I think having, you know, Patrick sum it up by, you know, some of what he said about Thaddeus and, you know, getting friends and meeting people through this whole process. I hope that everyone was inspired, that if you are faced with something like this, you're really not alone. There are some of us out here that can be resources for you. There are other communities going through this. And so if we can all pull together and become resources for one another, inspire one another, that was our goal for tonight. And we hope that we accomplished at least the opening of that part of the conversation for you. So I turn it back over to Vanessa, who's going to close us out.
Yeah, thank you all so much for joining us this evening. Remember, today's presentation will be available to view on our organization's Facebook pages. Thanks to my co-hosts for this webinar series, Lisa Graves-Marcucci with Environmental Integrity Project, and Robin Martin with Food and Water Watch. And an extra special thanks to all of our citizen team members who participated in tonight's roundtable discussion. Thanks to all of you. We appreciate you taking the time to watch tonight, as well as during the other parts of the webinar. And we hope you learned more about how to engage with government officials and how to advocate for oil and gas protections. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.